on. So I'm with Preston for part two of our Soul on Fire podcast, just interviewing cool cats, artists, and friends, really.
Cool.
And, in the last episode, we talked a lot about a whole bunch of things. There's not a lot we didn't talk about, actually.
Yeah.
But we ended on stewardship. And it sounds like you're in the process of organizing a party, which is stewardship for me. You're stewarding a party. So tell us about that and
Sure.
about sacred space. That's something my ears perked up when you said that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks. And maybe for the sake of like kind of the transition, it felt like our first conversation was really around maybe systems and kind of like our interactions and how we can turn certain challenges into opportunities to grow. I mean, that's how I kind of would like, it's very unnatural, but how I try to consciously, approach a challenge. And we generally want to react and try to fix something. And I'm like, what if we don't fix it? What if it's actually better broken? And, or maybe somebody else is meant to fix it, or, maybe it kind of suspends things in a state that we can get a lot more clarity. And so, yeah, I think that from the system standpoint, we talked a lot about physical space. And then, I think the other kind of key element is the people and the social fabric, and how those, either that fabric is kind of woven by a steward, somebody really intentionally builds a team that they want to achieve something. They end up doing something that other people are attracted to. So there's different ways that those fabrics kind of form. The thing that I find about exchange really interesting, and we may have kind of touched on this before, but it would be nice to bring into the podcast in case we didn't, is that a lot of people think and see, a beautiful garment or a sheet or a tapestry as similar threads, or like the same thread. It might be silk, it might be cotton, it might be satin, these things. And maybe the colors are different, right? So the tapestry looks beautiful, but ideally, like the threads, it's easier if all the threads are the same and it's woven a certain way, and it's consistent. And for me, it's almost like what we're trying to do is weave like maybe a little bit of leather in with a little bit of Velcro and in with a little bit of cotton, and because we all have such dynamic personalities, or I mean we people are dynamic, and even if it's inside, it's still dynamic thoughts and feelings, and so there is a bit of that, and sometimes it is uncomfortable. What are these supposed to achieve if they come together? And sometimes it's nothing. And accepting that is also part of the journey. But I would say that, a steward of a space or of a community or of a purpose is not necessarily like the controller of the thing. Like I often think of management, everyone's like, you manage exchange. And I'm like, like that sounds like I tell it what to do, like
right.
I don't, it's more to me about what I'm managing is maybe like the safety is more something that you manage,
right.
But the people, and similar to, comparing it to like a garden or the land again, is that you can't control the growth of a flower, but you can steward its surroundings. You can you can give it what it needs based on what
right.
You can listen to it, you can see how something is doing, you can touch the soil if it's dry, there's certain things that you can be aware of. And I feel like when you're working with a community of people, particularly artists, that can be quite sensitive on their journey. They're expressing something from maybe pretty deep within, something that's confronting. And I would say it's almost just being in that position across from that individual most of the time is just listening and just nodding and saying like, like, that sounds hard. That's okay. What do you, and often they don't even need we don't need sometimes, something from the other person. It's just, can I offer you empathy or can I offer you advice?
Right.
Like,
You want my head or my shoulder?
That's it. Be clear. That's right. Yeah. Awesome. That's a good one. So a steward, I think, is a better way of seeing. I mean, it's an alternative to the word maybe facilitator, or someone that holds some responsibility, particularly in the social work, I guess. I like to call it work, social play. We'll call it that.
Nice, nice,
And
nice.
um,
You're a social player.
yeah, thanks. Day one, damn. Yeah. So I think the other thing is that a steward, whenever you bring the right people together and they learn how they behave around each other, or perhaps they already behave a certain way, and they finally just find the people who behave like them, that tone of working together in that light creates culture. So, to me, a culture is a representation of a social dynamic or behavior. And when people walk into this space, they're kind of influenced by what other people are doing, even if they don't realize it. But they might, someone might walk in and just see that, they could pour themselves a beer, but then they look around and they're like, well, nobody else is pouring their own beer, or, making their own coffees. So maybe I'm not supposed to either. And it makes them kind of question, so what are the rules here? And there's a lot of history of how artists and activists and certain creative movements in the past practice something called, they call it culture jamming, which is where a group of people would do something just radically different than what everybody else was doing in that space. So in a public transport, bus, if 20 people all of a sudden got up and started dancing, the other 3 people would just be like, oh man, like I feel so weird for not dancing, because apparently the culture or the rule of this bus is to be dancing right now based on what most of the people are doing. And you suddenly feel like, oh, should I be dancing? Oh, I'll dance, I guess. It's not going to make me uncomfortable because everyone's already doing it. So being a steward is maybe being one of those people that make sure that people understand that they are being invited to dance, or that they feel that they don't feel,
Yep.
and that if they feel uncomfortable, that maybe it actually is meant to be, and that's also okay.
Yes.
But a steward is the person that, to me, is aware of those things, and this kind of helps take the conversation forward to, I think everyone is a steward. One might have like the title, or be paid and have expectations for those, or be paid for those, some expectations or responsibility. But the healthiest cultures that I've seen are the ones where everybody feels like they are responsible,
Right. Yes.
And yeah, do you have anything to add? I'm going to keep
No,
sharing.
I kind of do. Just agreement mostly, but yeah, I've observed that like where I study, it's called Praxis. It's a school that only teaches youth development.
Mhm.
And the year tours, or the second year, sorry, they're all really caring, and it was really refreshing to see, because they kind of put themselves in the role, or they kind of behave like the tutors.
Nice.
The way they interact with the first years is almost identical to the way the tutors interact with both them and us first years. And so
Right.
for me, that's a kind of a cool example, or that's what came to my mind when you just said a good culture is one where everyone takes responsibility for being a steward of some kind.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, totally. And even though it's probably like clear that there is like an instructor or a teacher, someone with, authority or something around, that doesn't excuse them from also stepping in and having, feeling like there may be an invitation to be helpful to other people. Not just
Yeah,
saying like, you are the teacher to that person, so that's your problem.
right.
And anything that they're working through, they're supposed to come to you with. It's actually like, well, maybe I've experienced that, and it's helpful if I share it from my perspective, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
they're encouraged, it seems, to do that for their own learning as well.
Nice.
To
That's
kind
good.
of reach out and ask if we need anything, support, or it's not like they were going around like imitating the tutors, but they were just offering themselves as, offering
Mm.
service to us.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's a really cool way, and maybe to also take the conversation to another level of having that the dynamic of stewardship change is there's a painter that's here that has I don't know if I shared this in a previous conversation maybe or in the last podcast, so if I did, just stop me and say yep, we got it. But there's a painter that it was here, and he came back to Exchange to be working in the studios and to do a residency, so he's living upstairs. His name is Tyler Stent, incredible watercolor painter. I encourage everyone to look him up and actually read, if you're interested, into what he is exploring with his work, which is challenging and confronting objectification in art. So when he came here, he realized that a show that he was producing, not that he wasn't as passionate about it, maybe, I don't want to be putting words in his mouth, but he had noticed and identified that what he was painting and the figure in his painting was, he felt like he owed them something, and that by painting them, he was objectifying them. And he said, there's a lot going on with me as a man and the figure as a woman, and maybe there's something in my head, and actually, like, am I objectifying her? And I want to dive really deep. And what he's written about it is powerful. And he asked, me and a few others in the community around, he's like, I want to challenge this. I want to start painting our bodies that are interacting with each other in different ways, because when I see some photographers' work that includes a lot of naked figures, my mind immediately goes to, oh, is he hurting her, or is he protecting her? Or, is she controlling him, or is she, manipulating him? And he's like, we think about how our bodies interact. And so we staged a photo shoot here. We've staged a couple now, and me and a couple of others kind of did a bit of like body balancing and figuring out how our bodies, some contact, dance, and movement. And he was taking photos and joining in. And he's turned one of them into a really beautiful painting. Actually, I have it. Let's see if it's right here. I think it's on here, so you can see it. And we went for a long walk, and he's exploring the role of stewardship as well. And he's like, it's amazing that I could come into the Exchange and immediately feel that I could safely explore this idea that I'm exploring. And it included, nudity and confronting these conversations in art. And he's like, it's just all happened so naturally. And so here's the painting that he did of us. So yeah, it's really beautiful. And
Man, I wish I could actually see it right now, because my computer is having a fit. It's just like doing all this stuff it's never done before, but I can't even.
No.
It's
okay.
weird.
I guess I'll send it to you so you can just have a look.
Yeah, I'm just glad that it hasn't kicked me off Zoom.
Okay, good. Well, we'll keep rolling on.
Yeah.
So we went for a walk, and he's talked about kind of like what he's processing, and how like, the reason why you could feel like you could safely bring this up to me at 4 a.m. in the hammocks hanging from the ceiling one night, and we could just say, yes, let's do this. Let's push what it is that you're saying you want to confront with your art. Let's push it. Let's do it. Let's do a photo shoot. Let's take our clothes off and roll around until you feel like the image that you want to use that challenges this idea of objectification comes to light. And so we did. And I talked about how the reason why he came back to Exchange and felt like he could make kind of these turning points in his life, and again, trying to consider how relevant this is to your listeners, because whether you're a teenager or whether you're an adult, you're going to be constantly, pivoting. Things will happen that you don't see coming, and you've got to readjust. Or you'll suddenly, like Tyler, have this feeling inside of be like, why am I doing this? And why, I think even your values change, as a human. And that's what he was feeling. And I said, oh, well, the role of me as a steward here is to, let you experience that pain, that learning, that turning point. And then when you say, I think that this is what it's telling me, and this is how I think I can do it next, I'm there to say yes. And how can I support you? Now, when he did that painting, he named it The Steward because, well, for one thing, I'm in it. And the three images, or the three bodies that are in the painting, again, when you look at it, you can't tell if you were to, which we do, automatically objectify the figures in the painting, it's hard to know who is what. So
Right.
he says, I'm naming it the steward because I want people to think when they see this,
Who
well,
is the steward?
which one is the steward? Is it the guy in the middle that's holding the girl? Is it the girl that's standing over both of them? And, it's not clear. And he said, so I like that. He's like, actually, so once we had this really big chat about stewardship, he's like, I'm going to name the painting the steward and I'm going to put it in a competition. Another night came up and I said, the interesting thing about that is that you named it the steward because you want people to question who the steward is. And you probably, as a friend of mine, Tyler, see me as the steward because I steward the exchange. But in this painting, the steward is actually the painter. So the steward actually isn't even in the painting because to me, I became a subject or an object of his art and he became the steward because he was protecting us. He was enabling us as models and he was providing us a safe space. He was providing us confidence. He was feeding us, ideas that helped us feel comfortable.
Right.
And
Sure.
I was like,
yes.
So I told him, I was like, what you should have done is actually done a self-portrait and then painted it white and then put us over the top. And so only we knew that actually his face was underneath the surface. And that was actually, and the point to that was that the steward's role is often invisible. It's often this very minimal, my art form is saying yes to him. There's no proof that I had anything to do with it. So there's a certain humility, I think that,
right. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying yes, but since you've given me the stage, I just did a podcast with a female artist in the States in Texas who does bhakti art in a Disney style.
Wow.
Her name's Hannah, and but we were talking about final form, what's your where are you going, what's your final form kind of thing.
Cool.
And she said it's probably going to surprise a lot of people, but I actually want to make YouTube videos that have nothing to do with art.
Wow.
They're more about lifestyle and bhakti and her spiritual practice, her sadhana. And I'm a little bit the same as well. When I think about, my ultimate offering, I can't see how a two-dimensional image can fulfill me as much in terms of knowing, I made a contribution to my community or to someone. I just can't see how a two-dimensional image could do that as well as something more like what you're describing and what Hannah was saying, which is sharing myself and relationships, right? Because you can't have an intimate relationship and feel and have a whole bunch of needs met from a two-dimensional image. It can make you think something different, but it can't make you, and it might be a bit to make you feel a little bit different too. But compare that with the role you're playing for so many artists, or compare that to the role of any kind of coach or steward or facilitator, like you said, enabler, someone who, my philosophy is everyone needs, well, not my philosophy, I think it was Bruffenbrenner. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he came up with a model called the ecosystem of the human being, and we learned about him at school. And he says everyone needs at least one person who's totally nuts about them.
Cool.
Right? So I'm starting to feel like maybe that's where it's at, more so than creating fresh art. Is can I be that person who's encouraging my artist friends and showcasing them. And that's what this podcast, that's what this zine is all about. It's like showcasing and curating an online kind of gallery of all my friends, and developing our relationship together, and then the world's relationship with them, and their relationship with themselves.
Nice.
And their art practice too.
Yeah. I guess that's kind of the thing is, you know, as an artist, I mean, it's like, what does that mean? Like, for Tyler, you know, he's a watercolor painter. While like watercolor paintings is his art, and you know, or that's how most would probably perceive it, or maybe that's even what he believed himself. But and when he does introduce himself as an artist, that's what he says he does. But now there's this layer for me. I'm like, you know, you're not just a painter, you're an artist in the sense that you are becoming like a you know, like a cultural leader, because you're not just doing the same as everyone else, letting something continue within the system, you know, this, you know, objectification. You could have seen your painting and said, yeah, I'm objectifying her, and I also have this deadline, and I want to do this show, and I'm just going to continue to do it. And that, you know, he would continue as an artist, you know, as a watercolor painter, but being willing to challenge that and to really, you know, shift the focus of and the results of his work, you know, tell me that there's more to his art than painting. You know, and I guess it is kind of like, and I'm sure actually we all have that, I believe, whatever two-dimensional image you create even is inspired by something, you know, a feeling or whatever that you want other people to connect with, identify with, feel, you know, whatever, or even just the joy of creating.
Right.
You know, I think that the joy of creating is a part of a culture that we've lost in art because of the challenge, the financial challenge of making it work as an artist. And so when we make art for fun or make music for fun, there's maybe, you know, people that say like, oh, like, are you charging for that? Or I guess it's like the difference between like doing a show and selling tickets versus busking. You know, like one is like, I really want, I need this to financially work for me. And I just need to do it. And then the other is like, I just love playing and I want to be on the street playing to people who will enjoy this. And yeah, you can do both, you know? And,
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So sorry, I feel I've kind of went down a a stream of, you know, like a side path on this conversation, but
no,
yeah.
I agree. I have this model that I'm using, developed by a saint named Bhaktivinoda Thakur about 500 years ago, and it's called the Tree of Life. And what it is, it's got the roots, the trunk, and the crown of the tree. And the roots resemble our need for spiritual connection and nourishment as spiritual beings. And then, you know, when the deeper the roots, the stronger the trunk. And the trunk represents, you know, our mental health and our physical health and our kind of character. So that's things like refraining from theft, because that messes with your mental health, right? That conscience that you have, right? And if you're living with that conscience, that sort of negative conscience, it messes with your psyche and your the way you're wired, right? And the way you relate to yourself and the world. And then, you know, it talks about keeping clean, being righteous, and it also has enthusiasm and purification of the heart. And then when these things are there, it contributes to an ability to produce something for other people. Like you can produce something nice to offer your community, or the world, or just someone. So for me, like when you talk about, you can do both, right?
Yep.
Like you can make two-dimensional images, and you can also be great in relationships. For me, they're both, like you say, they're both, you can do both, and they're both the crown. They're both
Nice.
fruits, if you like, that come from,
Cool.
yeah, they're both our contribution to the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes, yeah, like one, again, like kind of where we're at in growth and learning how to balance balance them. We're better at one than the other sometimes, or we feel like the need for one in our life to be practiced more than the other, you know, and I don't
Totally.
think either one is wrong. It's
Right.
just how,
Yeah.
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 Very cool. I think a cool thing to add to that, when you mentioned like having one person that is, you know, just, you know, feeding that kind of positivity to you, you know, or just feels like they need, I can't remember if you said needs you in
Right.
life.
Being nuts about someone.
Yeah,
Everyone
so I
needs
love it.
someone
Needs
who's nuts
another.
about them.
That's cool. There's something that I found some time ago. It's actually probably maybe 10 years ago when I first started really traveling, and it was around going deeper than the, like, you know, you are the most like the 5 people you surround yourself with. I'm not
Yes.
really sure I completely agree with that,
Oh.
but there's a kind of a cycle that I have seen and agree a little bit more with, which is, I don't know if it's called anything. I call it the 33% law, or the 33% rule. And the idea of it is just actually intentionally kind of balance keeping people around you that are either one, less experienced than you, have a lot to learn from you, things like that. People that are also on your level, that are, you know, maybe on the front lines, learning and working with you, you know, your team, the people that have similar experiences, or yeah, a little bit more as like a, you know, side, you're working side by side on things and on your level. And then one that is maybe a mentor or someone that you absolutely admire, you learn from constantly, and you're really drawing from. And I think that if you balance having those, then it constantly feels like you are in this process of information, or of, you know, learning and teaching, because there's someone that's always learning from you, and then you're practicing with your, you know, this cohort, your friends or whatever those people that are on your level are, and you're learning. So you're constantly drawing in something from someone, you're passing it, you're practicing it, you're passing it on, and then you're doing it again. You know, so that to me feels like a really healthy social balance. You know, I think the times in my life where I was around people who just were all more experienced than me, I felt like it was cool, but I might have felt like the imposter syndrome would sink in, you know, and I'd feel like, oh man, everyone's just more successful than me, and I don't really measure up, and I don't, you know, why am I even here?
Right. Yeah.
You know, you feel like that. And then like if you're only with the people that are around you that are only on your level, then there might feel like a lack of growth, because, you know, you just do the same things every day, you don't feel like you're getting ahead, you're not really, you know, yeah, you don't have any of that wider spectrum of like, am I even like being helpful to anyone else, or am I even learning anymore? No, I'm just, you know, doing this same thing every day with the same people. And if you don't, or sometimes you might end up as the teacher all the time, and you're just like, gosh, does anyone around me like know how to do this? And like, or am I just constantly solving everyone else's problems because I have, you know, more experience, you know, at the exchange, you know, I've been here almost the longest, you know, than anybody else who's in this community now. So it's like, am I just the dad here? You know, am I just teaching everyone? Or are there people also here that have ran creative spaces in other parts of the world, or who are, you know, a level up than, you know, a steward, like maybe they are, you know, just have particular skills that I look up to and I'm learning a lot from. So yeah, I've kind of been, and I think we will always be at some point in time feel like we're in each of those. But if we can set a bit of a, you know, balance to it, it feels like we can be in a really healthy place with the people around us. Yeah.
Nice. Which kind of brings me to one of the things I wanted to hear you talk about, which is so you mentioned in another video. I was just looking for a nice picture for the thumbnail. and I came upon a nice video workshop or a video of a workshop that you ran at Exchange, where you
Mhm.
talked about it was called failure something.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And you were really vulnerable in that talk. I appreciated that. And you
Mhm.
talked about the struggles that you went through to start Exchange, and the visas that you applied for and had denied like 3 or 4 times, and the kind
Yeah.
of inferiority complexes that you were dealing with,
Mhm.
and around belonging. Do you
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit to that, about belonging and that
Mhm.
feeling of I'm not good enough?
Yeah, yeah, and I think ultimately belonging is probably the strongest indicator of, for me, if what I'm doing is truly purposeful or not.
Uh-huh.
Even if I'm really weighing it against my own feelings or how anybody else feels. Um, yeah, belonging is something. I mean, even the founder of Exchange. So I didn't start Exchange. I came in when Exchange was about a year old, and it was actually a lot like it is now, in the fact that it didn't know totally what it was doing yet. um, but it really lacked the I guess at the time, maybe it was the community, the community that was actually using it for what it was here to do. There was, yeah, I don't know.
It sounds like the
Yeah,
thing that it is an ambiguous, ever-changing,
yeah,
flowy
totally.
space.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
yeah,
And the culture changes. It
right.
actually pretty well,
That's
because the
what
culture.
makes exchange, right?
That's right. Yeah, yeah, and we just yeah,
Had the
growing.
word changes in it, which is appropriate.
Oh, crazy, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, belonging is what the person who really did the hard yards getting it started, and is still the director here, um, alongside me, in this work. She says, and came to Christchurch ultimately because she knew that we had the opportunity in this city to build better buildings and better social environments based off of what we know from architecture, how important it is to create these open spaces where learning and change and culture are at the center, and purpose ultimately is at the center. And how she explains that is by saying, we have been in an age of production where everybody fit and belonged to their work, essentially. Like that was such a large part of their identity, and ultimately still is, I guess. But really, you were expected to do work for someone else. Most people were expected to do work for someone else. And the education system was just to train you to do it as effectively and efficiently as possible so that you could produce. I just think of an assembly line, and it's just like boring, and we're just cogs in a machine. And we're kind of pulling away from that, realizing that it didn't serve us very well. And now we're like, well, I don't want to just be doing work. I want to feel appreciated where I am. I
Right.
want to feel like I belong to something more than just making money for someone else. And that changes from the age of production to the age of belonging. And creativity to me is almost like the 95% of that, because we're not necessarily making for anyone else anymore. Now more than ever, we're actually making for ourselves. We're
Mm,
producing what we produce, what makes us individually unique, and what our voice is in our work. A lot of
mm,
companies are saying we have to be more inclusive to minority communities, or we have to have certain roles represented on our governance boards because we need to be more inclusive. And they're like realizing, like, holy crap, we've built a company, and the system that was just meant to generate money, where now we need to make sure that people feel like they belong here. How do you do that? Like, companies are like, whoa, this is like totally different world. And again, kind of that changeover, I guess, from like management to like being a steward, and like maybe there's a very different set of principles that fall under
right.
this now. And belonging is, yeah. So, and I think the failure side, that what you touched on, overcoming failure, or we often resist failure, and I think we all have this inherent, fear of failure. I think the fear of failure ranks with like more people are afraid of failure than death, like because that feeling is just so much worse than just not feeling anything at all.
Death
And
before dishonor.
exactly, yeah, exactly. There you go. Great, nailed it. That's it. And I find it really interesting because for one thing, for me, fear is basically the anticipation of something that hasn't happened yet and likely won't happen.
Right.
Like likely doesn't happen,
Right.
And it's something that if you can think about it that way enough, and it's hard for me to speak on now because I'm trying to be more particularly cautious of my privilege. As a white male, I can screw up, and I can also probably quite easily readjust in society and in my work than most people have that freedom to do. So everything that I'm sharing is done with just a footnote of noticing I am in a place of privilege, but I feel like a lot of it most of it actually does come from our attitude. For me, if you can anticipate that you will be afraid of something going wrong, then it makes it a lot less intimidating when something shows up that isn't working. And then just realizing like, okay, let's say if it really isn't working and it doesn't work, what are really the consequences? And try to be realistic, then let it feel driven by like just our emotions and like our fear of this thing. So it might be like, oh man, it would be horrible if somebody was to come in and like, steal something, I'm afraid that someone might forget to turn on the alarm when they leave the exchange.
Right. What if?
Which could lead to someone coming in to steal something and it not being found. And that whole process of being robbed is quite fear-inspiring. But when I think about it, I might say, well, what is it that they might steal? Okay, so they steal the laptop over there. Okay, so one, like, does the laptop have insurance? Two, how much is the laptop? Three, I've crowdfunded a ton of different things. Can we just raise $1,000 or $2,000 to replace it? Three, should I just tell that person to maybe hide their laptop at the end of the day and we don't have to worry about it anymore? You start realizing that it's not as bad as the process, of, for me, the thing that hurts me the most is maybe if someone feels like they have to steal or rob to survive or to put food on their table, and it's less about, what's happening to me personally. I think, do you have anything? I think that this is a great topic. I love
It's a beautiful topic, bro.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about the fears that I have, and this is something we just spoke about in my previous podcast as well. Kind of about what was it? Oh, okay. Fear. Yeah, most of my fears, because I made an inventory, like a stock take of all my fears, and then put the cause, right, why I'm afraid of that thing. And most of them were not good enough. Don't want to be like, don't want to feel not good enough or perceived as not good enough. But
nice,
a lot of those things are just around, like it's just good old self-consciousness, or
it's mostly social too,
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's like, I don't want to look bad.
Yeah.
Right? And that for me is the definition of inauthenticity, is trying to look good and avoiding looking bad, which I think is a tragic way to live, because it robs you of self-expression. And if you live a life of no self-expression, just fear instead, and pretending to be, just so you can look good and avoid looking bad, you're definitely going to have regrets on your deathbed. Yeah. Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Spot on. I think, there's quite a few very common quotes, and I don't know exactly how they're framed, but something along the lines of, if you don't live your life, someone else will live it for you. And that sounds great from the standpoint of like, oh, cool, I'm going to make choices then, and I will take control over my life. But really what that to me is, taking control of your life means keeping it out of the hands of others, in some way.
Yes.
And taking that fear of like social approval or acceptance and saying, well, if I accept me,
Right.
that's me
Yes.
taking control.
That's the
And
solution.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And when like, I mean, it's your conscious, like when you do something that you're disappointed with yourself, whether anybody else knows about it or not, that is such a worse feeling than if
Right.
somebody doesn't like you,
Right.
And for me, it's like, sometimes it's really clear when I buy something or I wear something and I'm just like, oh, I totally just did that to fit in,
Right. You feel icky, right? It's
and
like,
I'm just like,
oh,
everybody
yes,
else seeing it.
totally.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, bro, like I've recently made a conscious resolve to not change what I'm doing when I see someone coming.
Wow, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's pretty cool.
it's cool because like especially females, when I see like a girl coming, I'll like like change my posture or something, and it's just
Mhm.
like, hang on a minute, I just did that for validation, external validation,
Yeah,
and that's disempowering,
yeah,
AF, right?
yeah. That's yeah. You just that person's controlling your life.
Yeah, yeah,
I think that there's also a balance to it. Like I definitely don't think that like total individuality is also the measure of success. I mean, you look at like solidarity is like, I stand with
right.
this
With
and this people and this movement, like, and this is how you can identify that I do, so there's
right,
certain things. And I think it does come back to belonging. Do you want to belong
right,
to the person who's just walking past you, who knows nothing about you,
right,
doesn't care about you,
right,
or do you are you willing to work and be your own individual, and bring your own gifts to belong in something that's more important, where they do have expectations, of
right.
how you behave, or your language, and
Yes.
how you take care of your body and your appearance and things like that.
So it's
um,
not doing away with fitting in. It's just choosing whose expectations you're willing to uh, live up to.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And I think it's also just about aligning your expectations with those of the collective or the
Yes.
movement. And I think so here, for instance, again, I think we probably covered this in the last one, but this is a great way to bring it back around, is everyone here is here for a different reason. Like, that, I mean, the process looks differently for each one, but I think that the reason is to grow. And
Right.
when you have that as an overarching reason, you should be able to look past all the little bits that bother you, because you know why you're here.
Mm.
And whether you're living above the venue, whether you're a resident artist in residence, whether you're in the studios, the agenda of the fashion designer is very different than the agenda of the poet. Their paths are totally different. But when the poet shows up and is like, hey, I'm hosting an event, I need to kill the lights, can you turn your lamp on? There might be this like, oh, like, well, I don't know who you are, I don't really care what you do or why you
Mm.
do it, and now you're kind of interrupting a bit of my flow or my process.
Mm.
It's not, it's just like, oh, cool, like that's how you grow, this is how I grow, I'm going to get
Right.
over it and I'm just going to keep working. And it's, to me, is like getting in, stay in your lane. But like
Yeah.
our lanes are going side by side.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I don't think it's about like those expectations, and being however it was you just said, being your own individual versus you know somebody else's expectations. The
Yeah.
expectations can't even be blurred, as long as you're kind of clear with yourself.
Mm.
Man, that was going somewhere, but I like the way that we can use a relationship as an example of, the difference between a this and a this is like, yeah, they totally can get in each other's way, but if they both are still like wanting the same thing,
Right.
It's very minimal. This came up in a really big way. Actually, the night of our last conversation, which I believe was Thursday. Was it Thursday?
Sounds about right.
Interview. I ended up in my office here until like 3 a.m. with three friends, and we talked a lot of actually about stewardship. And it kind of came up. A couple of my friends were being really. Actually, I'm really glad I get to share this. A couple of my friends were being really careful with bringing to my attention things that they felt were not working at Exchange, and particularly with the living situation in the apartment above Exchange. And the way that we communicate is first like, hey, like I feel like just bringing this to your attention, and then it's like, all right, Preston, do you see what I'm saying? Like, do you think that you can sense what's wrong? Is there something you can do about it? Because you as the steward, you should, if people feel uneasy, you should be doing something to help them, right? And that's what they were kind of like implying. And I was like, I'm going to test this. I'm going to make them pretend like I actually just don't get it. And so I was like, oh, I'm not really getting it. Like, what you're saying is that this isn't working, but I think you really need to like tell me more specifically, like what I'm supposed to do about it. What do you mean? I just don't get it. And they were just like getting to the point that they were just like, like, like this, like this was not okay. And, we need more communication. And that's what it usually comes down to. It's like, we need more communication. And I was like, they got to that point where they were just like, And I said, oh, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to leave the group chat that we're all in. Everyone who lives here, I'm just going to leave the group chat. And they were like, what? Like, why would you do that? That's the opposite of what we're saying, And, like you're already like hard to, find time to communicate with and everything. That would make everything fall apart. And I was just like, no, like it would make everyone it would make it really clear that everyone here is responsible for themselves, and that if they aren't here to if it's not clear what they are here to do and they're focused on it, then maybe they don't belong here. That's the point of Exchange, is that you are in the place where you will be pushed to the brink and you will see what it is that bothers you and why it bothers you and what you need to do about it, not Preston. Right. And that's the hard work. Where do you go as an adult in your city or in your environment where when you walk in, you might be confronted with something you don't agree with, a system that is not explicitly clear. And in that environment, you are actually encouraged to figure it out for yourself.
It just sounds like life. I mean, wherever you live, you're going to have to confront your stuff at some point.
Yeah, I mean, you could work at McDonald's and still and be in that same conflict, just like, am I willing to put up with this for the thing I care about?
Right.
I don't know. How much do you care about McDonald's?
Exactly.
And for me, it's like, if you are here and you want to use the resources and the environment of a place that I find quite unique, you have to earn it, and you have to be willing to be tested, in that space and come up with the solutions yourself.
Right. In other words, you just have to be an adult. Like, this place is for adults, kind of.
You have to be willing to grow. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it was really cool. And then when I said that and they got it, they were just like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like, the reason why it's called Exchange is that we all are here for different, to be doing different things. And it's actually all not supposed to flow. And when it doesn't is our opportunities to grow and just take ownership of ourselves and say, I'm seeing that happening over there. This is what's happening within me, and I'm okay with that. I'm going to continue to do what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
And they then they started saying like, oh, you know what you should do? You should go upstairs and just like be really like say something just like, oh, why isn't anyone ever locking this door? And then just walk out again. But like, because I left the group chat, it means like I'm basically making my communication even worse. And now I'm just like making it really hard on people. And I was like, well, I don't want to make it like harder on people. But, now you get what I'm saying is, if they actually cared enough about being here, they would watch me do something like that. And instead of being like, man, Preston's such what a rude guy, they might say, that was an interesting thing he said. I'm still here doing what I'm here to do. That doesn't bother me. Like, that is the level that we could be keeping
Right.
negative thoughts and feelings, or, other people's problems even at a distance, and keeping ourselves kind of safe in our own, process and internalizing and stuff. Yeah.
Mm. No, thank you for sharing that. It sounds like stewardship includes a bit of fathering after all.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's 4 o'clock, brother, but so you've got your next meeting, and I've got some stuff to do too. So let's end there. But I really feel like this could be a regular show, like a monthly like growth show or something like that.
Yeah, man, that's like, man, yes, more of those. Like, I'll watch it,
I'll watch it.
yeah. No, that's cool. Other people, of course, like, yeah, but I like that. Yeah, I think the point of why you are creating in the first place is to invite people to share like what their growth and their journey's like, how they do it with the community around them, and then obviously like you being a bit of a catalyst means that you have a lot of you process a lot of what people are just shining onto you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
which is good.
Yeah,
Yeah, very cool.
very true.
Yeah, thanks for hosting and being a steward of these conversations.
No, thank you for all your insight, and that's stuff I couldn't learn without having such a cool project like Exchange.
Yeah, same for me. Yeah, and I think that the value too is that we can, when we receive this input, and like for anyone watching this conversation, it can help with a lot of sense making. But I would ultimately say it comes down to the culture and immersing yourself in a culture and a behavior like this to actually really get it.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of books on these philosophies. I mean, most of what I said is based on, Peter Block's book, Stewardship, written in the early 90s. There's a lot in psychology on parent-child relationships. There's an endless supply of advice, but I think whenever people tune in, maybe to you or I, and sense that this is what's available locally, and they feel like, oh, okay, so in this town, in this neighborhood, or even in this country, this is how some people are behaving, and that's what I want to belong to,
Totally.
And maybe it's an invitation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome, brother. Well, hey, enjoy the rest of your day, and see you on Instagram.
Yeah, sounds good. Catch it.
Awesome, brother. Peace.
Bye.